We have an unidentified flying object.
Researcher on a mission with Dr. J.N. Elias.
We have an unidentified flying object.
Welcome back to another episode of Dr. J Radio Live, and of course, I am your host, Dr. J, and as always, we have a fascinating show for you today, but today is an extra special show because it is along my favorite topics. As you've heard me say in the past, the way we're going to get the answers about the alien agenda, about what they actually look like, how they interact, just all the answers are from the contactees themselves, the people that have been taken for year after year, time after time, whose family members have been taken. Those are the people we should be asking the questions. And today we're not just speaking with anybody who's been taken, someone whose case I've been following for at least 20 plus years, who is actually one of the first books, if not the first book I've read dedicated to ufology, written by the belated and beloved, of course, departed Bud Hopkins. And that book was The Intruders. And I'm sure you absolutely will recognize the name of our guest, and I might as well bring her on. And that is Debbie Jordan Kauble. Ms. Kauble, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
It is an absolute honor to finally speak to you, because I remember when I first read the book, before I really became proactive in ufology, I had so many questions to ask you in the book, and now to actually have you right here on air with me, I think is just really fascinating. I guess we might as well just go to what you first recall, because obviously I think and as we talked about off air, I think these cases follow in family lines, and whether you remember something at a certain incident, I'm almost sure that goes back to your parents, at least one of them, and then maybe even your great-grandparents. In fact, Dr. Jacobs, I don't know if you know this, was able to track alien abduction through family lines to the 1880s, and he would have been able to go even further had there been more living witnesses. This was based on senior citizens' account talking about their great-grandparents' examples of beings coming into the room, or little things like that. The point I'm getting at, let's go to I don't want to say it's this beginning of the story, because the beginning is really in your childhood, but let's go to June 30th, 1983, Indianapolis, Indiana. Take us from there.
Well, I was a single mother, and I had been living with my parents, and my kids were little, and I didn't have a regular job. I assisted a gal that lived behind us. She was a seamstress, and I would go and cut patterns out for her, make a little extra spending money. And I was going to do that one night, and as I prepared to leave after dinner, I was standing by the kitchen sink looking out the back window, and I saw a light on at the pump house of the swimming pool in the back. And I knew that wasn't supposed to be like that, because I had been out there earlier. One of my jobs, I couldn't pay rent, so I helped around the house, and one of the jobs I did was to help take care of the pool at night, and there's a lot of work. So anyway, I knew that door wasn't supposed to be open, and there certainly wasn't supposed to be a light on in there, and it was an odd, I don't know, I couldn't put my finger on it at the time, but it just wasn't quite the right shade of light. But I mentioned it as I went to go leave. I got in my car and I went, and I decided to drive back down through the side driveway and check and make sure the light was, make sure the door was, everything was okay with that. So as I was going down through the side there, I noticed that that door was closed and the light was not. The door was now closed. And instead of stopping, which I don't know why I didn't, because you would think I would have, I just went on to the gal's house. It was right behind my parents' house. It took me a minute or so to get there, and I called my mother, and I told her not only had I noticed that the door to the pump house was now closed, but the side door to the pedestrian the pedestrian door to the garage that was attached to the side of the house was open. And I knew that wasn't supposed to be open because I had closed it myself. The dog, I put the dog in there. And I asked her if she wanted me to come home because my father was working the second shift and he wasn't home. So it was just Mom and the kids. And she was like, no, we'll be all right. I just locked the doors. Don't worry about it. And, you know, I'm not thinking of aliens or any weird stuff like that. I'm thinking of burglars, you know.
Real intruders, human intruders,
people,
exactly.
Humans. I'm more scared of humans. So, anyway, she's okay with it. She doesn't seem worried. So I was gonna just continue on with what I was planning on doing. And I hung the phone up, and just about as soon as I let go of it, it rang, and I just picked it on instinct, picked it up, and it was my mom. And she was definitely sounding a lot different than she had been a minute ago, and said she wanted me to come home. And, I mean, the phone rang quickly, so I'm like, what's wrong? What's going on? She said, I just want you to come home. Now, my girlfriend's husband, who heard me talk to my mom and heard the phone ring and heard me talking and heard the obvious panic in my voice, he says, over my shoulder, tell her to call the police. That's what we get. That's what we pay him for. And she heard him, and she said, no, I don't want anybody here but you. I'm like, well, all right. So I left the house, and in a minute, I was back home. I went back down the side drive where I had went down before to check, and I got out and went into the little patio room. She had the little Florida room, and Mom was in there, and Dad kept a shotgun next to the trash compactor. It wasn't loaded, and Mom says, that's not loaded. I'm like, they don't know that. I beat them to death with it. They won't know. So, and I'm not a brave person, or I am more brave now than I was 30 years ago, for sure. But, I mean, I'm not one to just go run out into the face of the unknown, stuff like that. You know what I mean? I'm usually more cautious. But I did, for whatever reason, went out there, checked out the pump house, checked out the back. I found my dog underneath my dad's ladder truck, and she was acting all crazy and wouldn't come out from underneath the truck, no matter how I tried to get her out. So I proceeded to go back to the garage where the door was still open, and went inside of it, flipping the light on, sticking the gun in, saying a few choice words, you know, trying to be scary. And there was a mattress set against the wall in the garage, and I thought, there, you're behind that mattress. I know you are. And I went over there like Elmer Fudd stalking the rabbit, you know, trying to go in there. And all of a sudden, something came over me, and it felt like I was on fire. I mean, and I can remember thinking, oh, my God, I've got to get out of here. I got to get out here right now. I'm on fire. I felt like my skin was burning, and I started to shake. And as I headed towards the door to go outside on the patio, I was hit in the chest area, in the center of my chest, by something, and I don't know what. I can imagine it would feel like lightning, but there was not any rain. The weather wasn't bad. It wasn't stormy. All I remember is, oh, my God, I'm dying. I thought, this is what it feels like to die, because it felt like every molecule of my body was vibrating. That's the only thing I can use to describe it. Like, it started in my chest and just spread throughout my body, down my arms, legs, up my head, and I couldn't move, and I couldn't see. Everything was this huge flash of white light. And I can't even tell you whether my eyes were open or closed. It was just so intense. And I know that it couldn't have lasted more than a second or two, because I don't think any human being could tolerate it. But it seemed like time just stopped or went in slow motion. You know what I mean?
Of course.
And then it slowly stopped, the vibrating stopped, and the light began to fade in my vision. The brightness began to fade, and I found that I couldn't move. I couldn't even speak, and I'm beginning to see stuff in front of me, but there's so many splotches in my vision that I can't make out a lot of stuff. It's like my eyes it's like when you kept your eyes open during the flash on a camera, you know, you just get this big splotch in your vision, you can't see anything. And then I felt a pulling. At one point, I felt a tugging on my shoulder on my my right side. And I felt a burning sensation in my ear, like a hot needle. I remember hearing a voice from somewhere. I couldn't see anybody. It was like behind me and above me, or somewhere behind me. Somebody said it was unfortunate that I had to feel this pain. In other words, it wasn't intentional. And it was my words, but it wasn't my voice. And if you can understand that.
Yes,
and,
yeah, like you weren't in control.
No.
Essentially.
And I remember being in the doorway, and then there's the lapse, and I remember being out on the porch, probably about 20 feet maybe or less from where I had been in the doorway of the garage. And I can see this thing in the yard. I can see it. I don't want to look at it, but I don't want to not look at it. I want to know where it is in relationship to me at all times. But it's so terrifying, I can barely make myself look at it. It's not that big. The pump house of the swimming pool was maybe, I don't know, average size, maybe 10 feet tall, like a mini barn, or, you know, or a mini shed size.
Yes.
And this thing wasn't much bigger than that, only it was egg-shaped and kind of flat on the bottom. And I really couldn't tell whether it was completely touching the ground or not, because sometimes down there it looked kind of wavery, like you're looking at it through the heat of a campfire, you know what I mean?
Yes, of course,
But
where like
still,
over the road or something where it's way above the heat.
Like a mirage on the road. It kind of looked weird like that. And there was several round lights around it, around the middle part of it, upper middle part of it, about the size of a basketball, white lights, not super bright. There was one in front of me, maybe 20 feet or so, and it was not attached to the thing. It was just in the yard in front of me. And it was maybe about as tall as I am, and I'm 5'3", 5'2.5". And it went down really slow, and then it went back up and stopped where it was. It was a soft light. It wasn't intense like that blast that hit me in the beginning. And I got the distinct feeling that it was looking at me, or scanning me, or looking at me, or something. I don't know. It had something to do with me. And I could see movement in the yard. And I couldn't see a lot of detail, but I could see people in the yard. And they didn't look like big people. They looked like kids, maybe 10-year-olds or 8-year-olds, you know what I mean?
Yes.
In height. And they had been, like, scattered about the yard, and there were, like, 6 of them. And they all kind of lined up in front of me way out there, and then kind of just glided down to that thing that was a little bit off to my left that I kept an eye on because I didn't want it coming any closer to me. And I kept thinking, oh, my God, please don't come any closer to me. Just don't touch me, please. I mean, that's all I can remember thinking of.
When you say glide, do you mean that they were not touching the ground? They were literally kind of floating above it and just...
Well, I don't know whether they were touching the ground or not. I couldn't see that much detail, but the movement was very smooth as they came down. So in my mind, I would think they glided, but I don't remember actually seeing feet, you know what I mean?
Yes.
But the movement was smooth coming down. In retrospect, knowing how big this thing was in the backyard, I cannot imagine it would be some kind of a craft, because I can't see how all 6 of them could get in there, and it wouldn't be, elbows to elbows, and no one could move. I don't know what that thing was in the yard. Now, you know what I mean? Thinking about it all that I remember, I don't know what that was, but whatever it was, they went into it. And at some point, I heard my name. And I remember thinking, oh, my God, my kids. And I heard that voice saying that my kids were fine. So I didn't need to worry about them. And then I heard my name, which I wasn't sure where that was coming from at the time. It was like a week later that I realized, and my mother confirmed, that it was actually my mother who had been standing in the upper part of the tri-level at the back at the kitchen door, just staring out the window, out the door, and decided to pop her head out and call my name. And it was like when she said that, when she called my name, it was like someone snapped their fingers. And everything that had transpired at that moment was washed away. There was nothing in front of me out in the backyard. I was standing there by myself. You know, I turned around, I picked up the gun that I dropped. I walked to the back part of the house, up the steps to go where she was, and I remembered saying to her, "Everything's cool. It's all right." And but then I had to go back to my friend's house, and I kept thinking, I don't want to sew anymore. I don't feel right. I want to get wet. I want to go take a shower. I want to go swimming. Let's go swimming. So I went back to Deanna, and I told her. And when I walked in the door, they acted like I'd only been gone a couple minutes, and nothing was ever said. And it wasn't until later when they got interviewed by Bud that I was gone for, I don't know, an hour and a half, something like that. I don't remember that. I don't even remember 10 minutes of that time, even to this day. And frankly, I'm good with that. It hasn't bothered me. It made life hard for me at this point. So, but they didn't react like I'd been gone that long. And I went in and I said to her, let's forget about sewing tonight. I want to go swimming. Because it was almost the July 4th weekend, you know. So it was warm. It was nice night swimming weather, and there was lights in the pool. It was nice. It was a nice pool. So she's like, yeah, it's cool. And she got her teenage daughter, and we decided to go. And we went back to Mom and Dad's, and we're walking across the backyard where all this had just taken place. And I'm feeling crappy, but I'm not saying anything quite yet. And then as we walk across the yard, the bottom of my feet start tingling and feeling weird. And her daughter really was complaining about it. And it got so bad by the time we got to the pool, this kid's complaining that her legs are like numb to her knees and start feeling weird. We got into the swimming pool. We didn't get our heads underwater. I didn't get my head underwater. But yet, if you're a kid, you open your eyes in the chlorine swimming pool too many times and you start seeing these halos around everything. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And that's what I was starting to do. My vision was starting to go all crazy halo-alike, and it was making me feel nauseated. It was so intense. And I'm like, dude, I don't feel good. You know, I got a headache. So, and she's like, yeah, I don't feel good either, and the kids don't feel good. And it's like, let's just call it a night. We'll go home. They went home, and I went home, went to bed. And shortly after that, Dad shows up. So a lot of time had passed. Dad didn't get home from work till like 11:30. And when I left to go sew, and it was like right before 8 o'clock. So quite a bit of time passed, but I don't have any concept of it or memory of most of it, you know. A little bit, I remember a little bit in a hypnosis session. And honestly, I can't even remember part of that now. It's been 30 years ago. And, you know, I still think I blocked some of that out. But
do you think during that time that you can't recall that they actually took you and you actually had close-up interaction, hands-on interaction with them that you just have blocked out? Or they purposely blocked out of your memory?
I don't know. I mean, I have some fleeting memories, and some things came back to me like, you know, when I start having dreams. This is what happened. The next morning when I woke up, my eyes were swollen completely shut. I could not open them. It was like they were full of glass. They were swollen, and I was in incredible pain. So my mother took me to the emergency room, and the medical records are there. I mean, Bud had them. Bud got them. The doctor asked me if I had looked into the arc of a welder's torch, and I'm like, what? No. I mean, young 20-something-year-old woman, never around anything like that, for God's sake. Who would do that? And so the doctor they rushed me across the street to where the eye doctor's office was, because they actually had more equipment to be able to look at me, examine me better in his office than they did at the emergency room. So mom run me over there, and I ended up with nasty conjunctivitis, what they diagnosed it as, and they gave me I had drops and gels that I had used for a long time, and my eyes were never right after that. I just had cataract, replaced both lenses in my eyes. I had macular degeneration in my eyes. That I was diagnosed with all this in my 30s. I blame that night because I know what it did to my eyes that time, and I'm not that old now, but I got crazy eyes. But anyway, so I had all that going on the next day, and then that weekend, what I said, the 4th of July weekend, and all the family came in for 4th of July to swim and light off fireworks. Prior to them coming, nobody had looked outside or even gone out in the back. Nobody. So when my nephew ran out there to go to the swimming pool and came running back in and goes, Grandma, come and look at your yard. And we went out there. There was this huge spot. The 8-foot circle was exactly where the thing was. And then there was like a 49-foot swath that came straight off and ended in a perfect arc all the way across the yard, where we would have walked right over that when we went to the pool that night. And my mom pops off with this, well, that's where the UFO landed. I looked at her and I thought, what is wrong with you, woman? And then something in my mind just snapped, and I'm staring at this spot, and all of a sudden it's like somebody pulled a finger out of the dam. And all this crap came flooding back. I saw the faces. I saw the light. I felt the pain. And I just came unglued inside. I started shaking, and I just went to hell in a handbasket after that. I'm telling you, for like 3 months, I didn't sleep all night. I would sit up all night and stare at my children, and I would sleep during the day when other people were home. I couldn't go to the bathroom at night in the bathroom upstairs because that window overlooked the mark in the yard, and I kept feeling like someone was going to take me out of that window. I literally had a nervous breakdown. I know I did. I mean, I never got diagnosed, but I know that had to be. I didn't get out of my pajamas. I couldn't function. Thank God my mom and dad are the kind of people they were, and thank God my mom was there. You know what I mean?
Can I ask you a question? Why did your mother say that's where the UFO landed? Do you think that she obviously had prior experiences, or when she popped out and said your name that initial night right before you ended up coming back with your friend and teenage friend's daughter to swim, do you think that she actually saw it?
I think she did. It wasn't funny, but odd. Like a week later, my mom says, oh, my gosh. Or we're in the kitchen, she's doing dishes, and she turned around and looked at me and says, oh, my gosh, I just remembered why I called you to come home that night, that night that was crazy. I'm like, what? She said, I was standing at the window after you left, and the sun went down more, and she goes, there was a ball of light around the bird feeder out behind the kitchen window in the backyard. And she said, it was about the size of a basketball, and it was white. But she said, I kept thinking that somebody was like shining a flashlight on it. And I kept trying to look for a beam, but I couldn't see one. And then I thought maybe somebody was pulling the side drive, but I couldn't see any headlights, and I saw no beams or anything. And she goes, and I started staring at it because it got kind of bright, and then it got real. She said, then it got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until it disappeared. And she goes, the moment it disappeared, I got it in my head to call you to want you to come home. I'm like, well, thank you, Mom. I thought I'd known that. If you'd have told me all that, I'd been like, lock the doors and call 911. I'm not coming back. Sorry about your luck, Mom. But, this is what she told me. And I'm like, are you serious? So I said, do you remember, did you see anything? She's like, just the white light, just the ball of light. I'm like, oh, my God, because I saw the white basketball-sized ball of light. And then another thing happened like 25 years later. Bud got contacted by a lady who lived the street behind us. Uh-huh. Somehow she'd heard about this, and her kids had been, they can't pinpoint the exact date and time, but it was at that same, around the same time in June, or late June, early July. Her boys were having a sleepover in their backyard, and they always slept in the garage. They camped out in the garage, and the garage faced the back of the wooded area, which is like what was between our house and their house. So basically their garage faced our house, except for there was just woods in between. And on one night, she remembered her boys came running in all hysterical because they saw what they said were hundreds of white balls of light, like the size of basketballs, drifting through the woods between our houses. And this is like 20-some years later, this lady comes forward. So she somehow hears about Bud or the book or something. But anyway, to go back to the June, I had, previous to that night, I had picked up a book written by Bud called Missing Time. Yeah, it had an orange cover on it. I used to take the boys to the library all the time because it was free entertainment, books. I read my boys' books all the time. We rented VCR tapes and things like that. And so I'd get an armful of stuff every week and bring it home. And I had picked up this book. I wasn't completely sure about what it was about. I've always been interested in paranormal stuff. We've always had weird paranormal activity around our family since I can remember as a little kid. And so, but I picked the book up, and I had begun to read it. And every time I'd try to read this book, I'd have such a massive panic attack. I'd end up in the emergency room thinking I was having a heart attack. Finally, after the third time, my mom's like, you need to take that book back because we cannot afford this. Quit reading that book. I'm like, oh. So I couldn't even finish the book. But I had known that there was a place in the back where you could write to the author, because a lot of times I'll pick a book up and I'll read the last few pages first and then look at the pictures and then I decide whether I want to read it or not. You know what I mean? That's the way I roll. But so I knew that his address was in the back of that book. But I sent it back to the library. Well, after this happened and I started coming apart at the seams and started having these little flashes of memory of things, like the eyes, and began to remember things from my past that I had just buried and forgotten about, putting in the weird file and left alone. All of this started flushing out. And so I went back and I got that book just simply to get his address. And I wrote like 40 million letters to him and threw them all away. And I finally wrote one where I pretty much nailed my older sister as the one I was writing about. I kind of tossed her under the bus a little bit without telling her, which she was pretty mad about later. But she got over it because she had an experience in 1965 where she had seen a UFO. She was taking my mother to bingo. And, she had a ton of missing time. She even remembered pulling into the church parking lot after dropping Mom off, and the UFO was right above her car over the church parking lot. And then the next thing she remembers, it's dark, and her car's being dropped out of the bottom of this thing, and it's time to go get Mom. Like the whole night was gone. And we used to tease the hell out of her about it, although we believed her, but we still teased her because that's how we were, and so I wrote about that to Bud, and then it's like, oh, and by the way, this happened a few weeks ago, and here's some pictures of the mark. And I mailed the letter, and I thought, I'm never going to hear from that guy again. He probably thinks I'm crazy, so maybe I am. I'm beginning to think maybe I am. And
but
you know what?
Obviously were not, clearly not.
Well, I was kind of hoping I was, because then they could just give me pills for this and it'd be okay. You know what I mean?
Be easier. Exactly.
Yeah, a lot easier. So, but anyways, I went out one night and I come home. Mom was laying on the couch. She goes, "Oh, you know, you wrote that guy that letter about that night and from that book." And I go, "Yeah." And she goes, "He called tonight." I'm like, "What?" She's like, "Yeah, he called." I'm like, "Oh my God!" And there it started. And I called him back, and we talked for a long, long time, and that was the beginning of the investigation that went on for years, really. Bud came out to the house several times, met with family, met with my neighbors, canvassed the neighborhood, met with my employer, friends. We explored other memories that I started having. Like I said, everything started flushing out. Even my mom and my sister started remembering things that we just, everybody has weird stuff that happens in their life. And you just kind of put it over in the corner somewhere and no, I'm not sure about that file, and you just leave it. We had a boatload of stuff in those weird files, and we were starting to remember things. I remembered the time when I was like 6 that I was gone for a whole day and no one could find me. And I was about 7, and my sister had taken me up to Michigan to visit family friend, my older sister. She's 11 years older than me, so she was like 19. I was like 7 or 8, and I was missing for the whole day. This is the same
sister that was had the incident at the church.
Yes. My oldest sister, yeah. Her and I actually ended up writing another book together, like a complimentary book to Bud's book, Intruders, which is titled actually "The Story of the Intruders Continues," and it goes on with some other odd things that were not in Intruders, and some newer things and things about me personally, changes that I have experienced, physically, psychologically, spiritually, and stuff like that. But yeah, this is my oldest sister. Now, and my little sister, you know who Teresa Caputo is?
Yes.
Psychic. My little sister is every bit as good as her. She talks to dead people. She started ramping up. She started having these experience. She'd always been kind of weird. I mean, when she was 2, she was telling Mom about colors around people and sparklies. Everywhere I touched, she said there were sparkles. And now she's to the point now where she does this sort of thing, and it's almost kind of crazy, freaky, because she's so good. Everybody, all the females in my family seem to have these little abilities that are coming out.
But
and then there's my brother.
That actually brings me to a perfect one of the 3 questions that I had that I was hoping to cover before our hour's up. Is I was hoping, and you just pretty much answered it, that having contact with these extraterrestrials, I'm assuming that they unlocked some sort of abilities in you, as Jim Sparks says. It kind of wakes those muscles up, and that's why you're able to have poltergeist effects or telepathy or other things like that. Do you think your sister's psychic abilities have to do with her being taken, and have you yourself had anything happen psychic-wise since then?
Oh, I think I agree with that. I agree. I don't know if it's the act of communication that flips the on switch somewhere. I mean, I think everybody is capable of all this, but there's something connected inside of my head that wasn't connected before. And I get a feel from people when I look at someone or get in their direct vicinity. I kind of know them. I can't even explain it. My older sister is the same way. My mom was always that way. Even my dad was. I was born into strangeness. I was born to be strange, I think. My mom and dad, they didn't have any kids for like 11 years after they had Kathleen. They were trying to have babies and said they couldn't have any more. And they moved over to this other place that they lived the rest of my life. And I'll never forget it. I keep hearing the stories about how all the neighbors climbed on the roof to watch the UFOs. I don't know what it turned out to be, airplanes or something, because it was kind of like the whole neighborhood always joked about it. But then, 6 months after Mom and Dad moved in over there, they found out they were going to have me. after they were told they weren't going to be able to have it anymore. And then Sherry and Bobby came right after, so it's like kind of weird how we all just arrived. But my brother is the only one that won't speak about it. It makes him nervous. And he's different too, like us girls, but it's hard to read him. He doesn't like to talk about it. And he was in the Air Force for 8 years. Actually was even stationed at Wright-Patterson for 4 years as a reserve. We used to try to bug him about things, and he would not talk to us. So, but Mom had his old school papers. You know how kids doodle on their work papers and in their binders and things. She had school papers from my brother when he was in school, in junior high and elementary school, and they had little stick men all up and down the sides of them with the big heads and the big black eyes all over them. And this was, my brother's in his 50s now, and this is when he was in elementary school.
So this
it's not like you see that. Yeah, but it's not like you see that stuff on TV or at Walmart or at the store back in 1969.
Yeah, the concept of gray aliens or these types of extraterrestrials wasn't even known to Hollywood at the time.
No, and even when I drew the pictures for Bud of what I remember seeing that night and what I remember seeing in my bedroom in 1978, and I drew that picture for Bud, and then Bud produces another drawing from a woman in North Carolina or South Carolina or somewhere. And at first, I thought it was my drawing. It was so much like mine. It was near identical. And when I realized it wasn't my drawing, that someone else had drawn this because she had seen this, I literally threw up. I got physically sick because that told me the only way this woman could have drawn this like this was if she'd seen what I'd seen, and that meant what I'd seen was real. And I had been desperately trying to make that not be real, to make myself think, I must have remembered it wrong, or I must have been dreaming, or I must have imagined this. I mean, I tried so hard to deny this. And then when that woman, there's no way that I could deny that. And it literally knocked me off my feet.
This validated everything you've literally were experiencing, thinking about, and you did what normal humans would do of try to push it away and hope there's a rational explanation, because as a society we're told monsters don't exist. Yet you come face to face with one and you see that someone else has that you have no connection with, then that just validates what you went through.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we have a little over 15 minutes left, and there's a couple incidents I wanted to talk about briefly before I go into what we're going to talk about we're going to talk about at Zero International, which we'll talk about again near the end of the show, which is happening Saturday, April 4th here in Los Angeles, California, hosted by Yvonne Smith. The headline speaker, of course, is Debbie Jordan Kauble, as well as Travis Walton and filmmaker Tracy Torme. There's two incidents from the book that always stuck out in my head aside from the initial incident. One of them was the trip you took to 7-Eleven where the clerk wasn't quite normal per se. Do you recall that incident?
There was several incidences. No, I don't recall the 7-Eleven. I'm recalling a bus trip back from New York when we stopped at a bus stop and nobody was normal in there. I can't remember. It's been so long and there's been so much.
I was just going to say, exactly. So it's okay, because that means it just goes to show how much substance there really is in your case. Let's go to this other question that I had written down directly again from my first reading of Intruders several years ago. I want to say in the early 90s. And it's basically when you were on the craft at the first time they sort of showed you the babies, the hybrid babies, and told you that it was yours, and they wanted to take it away from you again after you were holding it, and you essentially started crying, and they couldn't understand why. Do you remember that incident?
Yeah.
Can you talk about what led up to that? I know we're coming closer on time, but briefly, can you talk about what led up on that incident and how it came to be where they placed that hybrid child in your arms and how they reacted when it was time to take it away?
When I held the baby, I knew it was mine, and I looked at her, and there was something human about her, but not, you know what I mean? But I just felt very maternal, and when they took it away, and I said, "That's mine. You can't have that. I mean, this is I want it." And they promised me that I would see it again. But when I remember them looking at me and thinking, the look, they didn't understand my emotions. And all of a sudden, it was like I felt every single emotion every human can feel all at the same time. It was like something was being blasted back at me, like so they were trying to understand. I remember vaguely some kind of an exam where it felt like my insides were being opened up, and in my mind I could see like a flower opening. You know what I mean? That's what it felt like, and I was in a lot of pain, and frankly I blocked some of that out even after I remembered it, but and I kept thinking I remembered that after the June 30, 1983. That's one of the things that I remembered during one of the hypnosis sessions that I had. This little incident where I felt like I was having some kind of a physical exam, you know, in no way sexual like some people think. And then when they brought this child in to see me after she was bigger, and she was so afraid of me that she couldn't even look at me, and it broke my heart because I knew she was mine. This was mine. And
have you seen the hybrid children since?
I saw that girl.
How many years later after that incident? How much older was she?
The last time I saw her, I think she probably would have been like maybe 8, maybe 7
so
or 8 years old.
A full-size child at that point.
Right. And this was at my house. I'm not talking about when I was, wherever it was I was when she was within. This was actually at my apartment. And I saw somebody looking at me through the slats of my privacy fence. And I'm 99% sure it was her. When I went out to run after her, there was no one. They were gone. But what kind of 8-year-old kid wears black boots and black pants and black shirt? You know what I mean?
Non-human kids, of course.
Not any kids I know.
Yeah. What's the most recent experience you can recall, or at least that you maybe have undergone hypnosis to remember?
Well, back in March of 2005, here where I live now, there was a tremendous explosion, and I was a witness to it, and I had seen several orange balls of light in the sky several times with the month prior to that big explosion. It ended up becoming known as the Kokomo Boom, and it got national coverage.
That's right.
A lot of people reported seeing craft, aircraft, UFOs and debris, and I have the police scanner reports saying there was a known debris site and all kinds of stuff. There's crazy cover-up going on. But
so you're actually inferring something that I've always had a suspicion, that it wasn't just UFOs being chased by our jets, that it actually was a crash and retrieval.
The people that reported seeing the UFO, they reported seeing an explosion in the sky and then debris falling. So I just saw the orange balls of light, and I heard the F-16s, and I got videotape of one of the balls a few hours before the explosion, and a videotape of the animals in the whole neighborhood going absolutely berserk You can't see anything, but you can hear them, and it's kind of crazy. But something happened in my mind when I saw those orange balls of light. Had not had anything happen to me like this for years and years. Been very quiet. Actually been involved in paranormal research. Had felt there's a link between UFO and paranormal.
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree. And when scientists try to look at the UFO phenomenon and try to separate spirituality, anything, I don't think you can do that either, because I think it all comes into play. Paranormal, UFOs, extraterrestrials, and consciousness. I think everything is linked, and I think to try to separate them, you're not going to get the answers. And so wouldn't you agree with that statement?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I've got tons of recordings of something. They call them EVPs, but they're so clear, it's just sick. It's crazy. They're so clear, and it's like all my other paranormal investigators I work with call me the antenna, because for some reason I can record this stuff. And it's,
what are some of the messages that these EVPs say to you?
Well, I don't really get messages per se. I mean, one time we asked. One of our clients asked, "Is Uncle Charlie, is that you?" And clearly, as clear as if he's sitting here on the phone with me and you, he says, "Well, I'm right here in this chair."
Wow.
And the woman, when she heard the voice, because there was no one in the room with us like that, just burst in tears because she said that was him. That was his voice. She recognized him. So it's not really messages for me, per se. It's for whoever we were working with. And then I had just the one recording we did about 20 years ago of my voice saying the words in the Nakma, which we still have no idea what that is.
Can you say the words one more time? What your voice?
In the Nakma.
Interesting. In the Nakma. I would love to look and see what we could find on that.
And the funny thing was, it was my voice that said it, but I was sitting there dead quiet for 30 minutes with my nephew, and neither one of us said a word. It was crazy. And then we heard an old man saying, "Are the spirits listening?" And then a child's voice say, "Can I listen too?" And then when we heard that, I looked at my nephew and I said, "Maybe we're the spirits, and somebody's trying to hear us."
Or maybe you're the bridge. I think that's probably more the case.
I don't know.
But obviously, it sounds to me like the plane that they're on is obviously much bigger than us, because we only live for so long. And if you have all those spirits of all those that passed, where would they be? And that makes just perfect sense. That maybe what you just said, that maybe we're the spirits that they're trying to hear, because there's so much of a bigger population on that dimension per se.
Yeah, my brain kind of exploded in the last few years with all this theoretical stuff, so I'll be talking about that.
Well, exactly. I was going to say, now that we have about a little under 10 minutes left, closer to about 7.5, 8 minutes, I wanted to ask you, before we go into the details of what you're going to present at CERO, how has this changed you and to become a new person from the fearful person that you were having, and with you going through these incidents that at the time you thought was crazy and bizarre, but it wasn't until you realized through God-honored Bud Hopkins that really showed you the truth?
Well, first of all, I figured if they were going to kill me and eat me or do some other terrible things to me, I would have already happened. I would not be here talking to you. And I think that I think I'm like a part of me died that night in June, and another part of me was born. Something was reborn in me, or turned on, or bloomed, and it's just grown ever since. It's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger in my mind. You know what I mean? And I'm not afraid anymore. I have zero fear about any of this stuff. I would not be afraid if they walked right in here right now. I wouldn't. I don't know how to explain it, and I don't quite understand why, but I know it's okay. It's the way it's supposed to be.
Do you think at all that when you've come across these beings per se, that you might be having a mission which maybe you're living out right now, that you're by educating people and helping other people as a paranormal investigator to connect to the other side. Do you think there's a particular reason that you were chosen, or there was an underlying mission that they've wanted you to complete?
I don't know if I was chosen, but I think I was born for a destiny, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm so frustrated right now because I'm trapped, in the world where you have to work and pay bills and stuff, and there's so much I still need to do that I know I have to do, that's in me, that I have to get out, that I have to write, that I have to do. But the bill collectors don't give a crap about that. I got to pay my bills, you know what I mean? But I feel like, yes, I have a destiny and I have a purpose, and I'm trying to fulfill it when I can. I'm doing all that I can, and I'm being taken care of. Whatever I need, somehow the universe always manages to get it to me. So I know I'm on the right path because of that. And I know it has something to do with all this alien stuff, or whatever you want to call them, other life.
And that's why I personally think you are amongst the chosen ones, because not only are you being protected, you've had that fear lifted, and you are doing everybody a great service talking. Because one thing that I've noticed is each person that talks about their experiences inspires others who've been closeted. And now I wanted to shift that focus, because the fact that you're coming to California to speak at Zero International, which everyone can go see Debbie in person, again in Los Angeles, April 4th, 2015, of course. You can go to CEROinternational.com, CERO, which is Close Encounters Research Organization, CEROinternational.com. In a couple minutes or less, what are you going to be telling everybody when you come, aside from the story that you basically talked about? Because there's so much substance to your case.
There is so much to my life and to my case and to that of my family. It's really hard to whittle it down to a couple of hours or an hour in a talk. But I'll do like a crash course for anybody that doesn't know who I am or why I'm here, what led me here, but and try to make it abbreviated. But and then talk about what I've been doing lately, and how I'm growing and feeling, and what I'm feeling about the future.
And this is exactly why I think it's so important that you are doing it, because, again, you are going to inspire those people. They need to know what's happening to them, and by you understanding what happened to yourself and explaining that to other people, and all the gifts you've been bestowed, that goes back to my final question, which I hope we don't run out of time. Jim Sparks, when he first was taken, he obviously feared it, and he fought it to a T. But years later, he was asked the question that if he had a chance to have his life where he had never been taken, would he choose that? And he said, absolutely not. As fearful as he was of his contacts initially, he wouldn't take them back for the world, because they have essentially helped him grow. Do you feel the same way?
100%. I would not change anything about my life. As crazy as my life has been, even the non-paranormal UFO or non-paranormal or non-UFO stuff in my life has been insane. I have had a house drop on me and lived through a tornado. I've watched people I know die. I have had crazy life, but I wouldn't change a thing, because it's making me who I need to be for why I am here. And so it's all good.
And this is why I think it's so fantastic that so many people are starting to feel this, because less fear is starting to develop after, of course, years of these contacts, when people realize, just exactly as you said a while back, that if they wanted to hurt you, they would have done so, essentially. And, of course, because they haven't, then you realize, well there's obviously some ulterior motive. And the fact that you've grown and other people feel the same way is phenomenal. Now, if we could just educate the rest of the world, I think that by you speaking, you've been doing such a fascinating job. Debbie, we got a little over a minute and a half, and I wanted to give you this time to essentially talk about where people can find you and what's next for you, and are you going to have any other speaking engagements aside from Zero?
I don't have any other speaking engagements set up. I very, very rarely do them at this point now in my life, because, like I said, I have to work so much. hopefully that will change as I can retire. And but you can always hit me up on Facebook and connect with me there. I like to talk to people. I like to listen to other people's stories and try to help them feel comfortable and understand that, you know, they're not crazy and that they're not alone. So.
And I think that's absolutely fantastic. We absolutely have to continue do this again. I would love to get into more detail and go past that initial incident and maybe talk about things that happened since then. And of course, anything that we could do to aid everybody else. Debbie, it's been such a fascinating honor. I must thank you again, and I truly look forward to seeing you at Zero International. Everybody out there listening, again, Zero International, April 4th, 2015, Los Angeles, California. Debbie Jordan Kauble, of course, the headline speaker, along with Travis Walton and the filmmaker Tracy Torme, who made the movie Fire in the Sky. You could see this all at cerointernational.com, CERO international.com. Also, another website to pay attention to, another large-scale event happening in May, Joshua Tree, California, May 29th through June 1st. Contact in the Desert. Travis Walton will also be speaking there, and he'll be speaking about that in the next hour, as actually will I be there too as well, and so many other people. And we are doing an exclusive ticket contest. Go to contactinthedesert.com/DRJ, Dr. J, contactinthedesert.com/Dr. J, where for 1 week, for 10 weeks, we'll be giving away one ticket and announcing them right here on the Tuesday night of the shows, beginning in, I believe, April. I want to say April, the Tuesday after April 9th, so that would be the April 12th, Tuesday, April 12th, all the way to the event. Everybody watch out for your name. Again, contactinthedesert.com/DRJ. And of course, this interview, as with all our interviews, are going to be uploaded on our channel. And you can see everything at drjradiolive.com. And of course, we do take guest requests. So if there's anyone you haven't heard over the last few years that you would like to hear, please contact me via that site. And all social media accounts have the same account name, Dr. J Radio Live, whether it be Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Flickr, Tumblr, YouTube, you name it. You just need to reach out. That's where you go. And again, stay tuned for hour 2. You'll hear Travis Walton and Tracy Torme as we come back from this short break.